and welcome to Talking Cars. I'm Jennifer Stockberger.
I'm Jake Fisher.
And I'm Mike Quincy.
So this week we have a special 3-segment episode. The first is what I'm calling our Be Prepared segment, in that we're going to talk about getting ourselves and our cars ready for Old Man Winter, who will be here before we know it. We'll, of course, answer your audience questions. And third, we will welcome a special guest, our Consumer Reports President and CEO, Marta Tellado, who's going to join us to talk about her new book, Buyer Aware. But before we get to that, let's start in with winter's coming. And probably the first sign of that, I think of, we have this row of 50 new cars out there in that first 40-degree morning when all the tire pressure monitoring systems go off. And so this week we're going to talk about getting ready for winter. And that's probably the first indicator for anybody who has tire pressure monitoring, is that you're going to see that drop. Just to remind everybody, inflation pressure drops as the air temperature drops. So if you're in an area where cold weather is on its way, you might want to think about bumping up your tire inflation pressure, not only to get that tire pressure monitor light to go out, but it's also a way of keeping your load carrying capacity and your tread pattern on the ground and everything, as winter wants to reduce your inflation pressure, because tires lose air and natural gas law says they're going to lower inflation pressure. So 2 or 3 PSI, depending on how much you're expecting your temperature to vary. And that's just step one.
And if you're an economist, you're really excited about lower inflation, but not when it comes to tires.
Winter is the Inflation Reduction Act. That's kidding.
Wow. Natural
inflation. That was a good one. Yeah. So anyway, but again, inflation is just the first step. That's assuming your tires are in decent shape. Mike, obviously tire replacement is another big change if winter's approaching.
Yeah, depending on where you live. And we've often talked about this in terms of your regular commute, your regular driving conditions. If you have a kind of a job where you're an emergency room nurse, you're a firefighter, you're a police officer, you have to be on the road regardless of whether or not schools are open or closed. You need good tires to make it through the snow. Here in the Northeast, we sometimes see winters of several feet of snow, and because not everybody needs an SUV. Everyone's talking about, I need an SUV and blah 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 blah. But most times we see that if there's a hint of snow, they close the schools the night before, even before the snow falls. But again, if you're in that kind of profession where you have to be on the road regardless, then invest in a set of winter tires, and the time to shop actually is now.
Yeah, and certainly even more so, we have the tire program here, and Ryan has actually had some of the supply chain issues in getting tires, even for our own test program. So if you're thinking you need tires, one, go out and look. We talk about the easy quarter penny test to see where your tread depth is. If you have 430 seconds, which is George Washington's head, in the groove, and you can still see the top of George's hair, that means you're below 430 seconds or right there. Definitely shop, particularly if you want winter tires, even more so. Make sure you put that order in, get out there now. So many people wait until that snow flies. And then
and the safety, as Mike was saying about the all-wheel drive thing, I just want to kind of, hold on that for a second, because so many people now, especially where in the snow belt, have all-wheel drive, whether or not it's their car or their SUV and whatnot. And it's just a reminder that doesn't really help you as much as you think so. It helps you get going, so maybe you're not going to get stuck. But when it comes to stopping or staying on that curvy road, the things that really are safety related, all-wheel drive doesn't really do it for you. It's really just that contact patch of those tires.
Right. And that kind of segues to another part of preparing your car to winter. And that's, checking the things you take for granted, checking your battery. Is your battery's voltage up to snuff for a cold winter? The general rule of thumb is if you live in a cold climate, you're probably only going to get like 4 years out of your battery. And if you live where it's hot, you might only get about 2 years out of your battery because the heat will degrade the battery more. But again, it's something you take for granted. When was the last time you had an oil change? When was the last time you got your car's coolant checked? As we have many of us have worked at home for the last couple of years. As you mentioned, the cars don't get driven that much. and we don't really think about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, for the battery, one thing about the batteries are you can have a pretty weak battery and it'll still start the car. But suddenly that very first day when it's like 20 degrees outside and it's not starting, and it's a much harder start that engine in those cold temperatures. So it would be much nicer to take care of it, now or earlier before it gets really cold and having to deal with it then. There's other cheaper things too that you could start thinking about too. You think about just like having a snow brush in your car. The first time it's covered in ice and snow, and you're like, you see everyone with a credit card trying to scrape off ice. You don't need to. For $5, you're much better off. Wiper blades. They're very inexpensive, very easy to change. And to your point, most auto parts places will just do it for you.
Right.
And they're so inexpensive. And the truth is they don't really last that long. If they're 6 months old, they're not working as good as they were. So it's just something so easy to change. And then you don't have the streaks, and, it's not, you're not really, really clearing your windshield.
Right. I just think of the extra load, the slush they have to move, and the road,
Yep.
Sand and salt that they've got to get out of the way is just going to make them better. I also, Jake, and you're kind of getting, stuff you may not think of until Murphy's Law says, oh, shoot, I'm going to need this, is things like windshield washer fluid. You're going to run out of that on the day when like the road sprays like incredibly. So I actually keep a jug in a car, there.
The trick with that is finding some place where it's not rolling around and bashing into things. Yes. So that's the hard part.
Yes, secured. Maybe you need a nice basket, an emergency basket, because that's the other thing. Cars are so reliable that we take for granted, cell phone, make sure it's charged. We say all this stuff. Your AAA or your roadside assistance subscription, is that up to date? Some warm clothes. I'm forever, I don't like to have all these layers on. So maybe I run out, I say this all the time, you go out for coffee in your slippers and your pajamas, but you didn't, that's when you have the fender.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is just, beyond the car, but also, how to drive yourself. I mean, obviously it seems, very, obviously, driving in the snow is different, but, the very first snowfall or the bad weather, you see it, right? I mean, how many cars have made it off the road and are out in the woods? It's because we're not used to it. So, that first off ramp that you're like, I have no problem going around this off ramp at 55. Suddenly when it's 20, it might be icy and it's a whole different experience. So, I mean, just kind of recognizing that and, best practices. Probably I've done driving schools and winter driving schools all the time, but I mean, really just comes down to is be smooth.
Yes.
Drive smoothly.
And we all have taught our children how to drive cars and beyond even, yes, drive smoothly. But what I always tell them is like, slow down.
Yeah.
Just go slower. If your normal trip that you take on a regular basis takes you 20 minutes, guess what? Count on 30 minutes and go a little slower, because that, most of the accidents, they result in, lack of traction, but usually it's excessive speed for the conditions.
I also think too, the wackiness of the climate, whatever the is that places that didn't at one time get the ice now get it. The places that didn't have the really low temperatures now sometimes get them, even if they're considered southern states. Sometimes those ice storms hit, they don't have the capacity to remove that or sand that or salt that. That's not their expectation. So the roads may not be in as good a shape. And so don't think, just because you're in a what's traditionally warmer spot that you don't need some of these tips. Yeah,
I'm going to get nasty letters on this one or nasty comments, but it's not just the road conditions; it's the driver conditions.
Right.
You go someplace where people are not used to it,
right?
And suddenly now, once in a blue moon, all of a sudden we got icy roads. People aren't used to it. You might be better off up in Canada where people are driving in the snow all the time. So that's just something to keep, be defensive. Assume others can't drive in the weather and keep your distance from everyone.
Again, we lost a couple years there of driving and expect more. So certainly it's not too soon. I think that's the moral of this segment and why we're airing it now, to shop for things like batteries, tires, hone your skills, get your car ready, and get yourself ready. So moving on to your question of the week, as always, we really love this segment, TalkingCars at iCloud.com for your written video, 30-second videos. We love them. So this week's question comes from Evan, and get ready, you guys, for some personal insight. I'm halfway through a mechanical engineering degree and realizing that a lot of career paths aren't as fulfilling as I thought. I've been watching Talking Cars since middle school and was thinking about how fun it would be if analyzing and discussing cars was your job. How did you all get to this point in your career? And do you ever have summer interns? So, Jake, I'm going to go to you first for Evan. What was your road to this tremendous success?
Yes. So I'm with you. Mechanical engineering, been through it. It's interesting. I mean, there's lots of different career paths, certainly in mechanical engineering. I got into it because of cars. That was the only reason I got into engineering, was just because I really liked cars. I first worked at a supplier, worked at an automotive supplier, worked at automotive companies, and then ultimately here. But I would say, look, getting that background of really what goes on is really helpful. And there's so many different ways to get into it. So, I mean, look, if you're into cars, automotive suppliers, there's tons of them. Automotive companies, there's more than ever now with some new car companies. I mean, it's not just Detroit, it's also California. And there's all different types of suppliers that are getting into, not just traditional, I'm working at the, throttle body guys or whatever it is, but also, all the human factors that goes into things like, advanced driving systems and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's so many different opportunities to get into the auto industry. In terms of internships, yes, we do offer that. Check our website. We have a careers area where we have job postings. We also post the internship openings there. I mean, in terms of like writing and reviewing, actually, I'm going to flip to you, Mike, because you kind of have a really nice, robust experience in terms of writing about cars.
Thank you. A good story. Okay. And just bear with me a little bit. So do you remember when you're a kid and say you're in grade school and you get this essay of what do I want to be when I grow up? Mm-hmm. You have to write this essay, and your classmates will say, I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, a firefighter, a police officer, teacher, whatever. So I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought, gosh, my dad brings home all these magazines. He commuted in and out of New York City for years, so he was always reading. He always brought home copies of Car and Driver, Road and Track, Motor Trend, Hot Rod. I mean, everything. And they're always sitting on the coffee table, and I was always picking them up, and I was reading them, and I was rereading them. I was studying the photos and everything. And I thought, well, what if I would work for one of these magazines? I thought, well, that's a good gig. You're writing about cars, and I like to write. I like cars. And so I went back to my room and I wrote my essay up. And this is before computers, so it's in regular notebook paper. I walk out and I hand my essay to my dad, and he reads it, and he looks at me, and he looks at the paper, and he's like, that's a stupid idea. I mean, he really thought it was just the dumbest thing he'd ever heard. It's like, you want to write for a car magazine? What are you going to make like $10,000 a year or something like that? I mean, he just thought it was ridiculous. But so it kind of crushed me at first, because he was the first car guy in my life. My advice for Evan, and it really makes my heart warm because my oldest son is named Evan and also loves cars, is that I think you can approach this through either an engineering background or a journalism background. And it's certainly looking at your note, you're halfway through your engineering degree. So my advice is take as many writing classes as you can, because if you want to write for a car magazine, you need some chops. And even if you're not going the journalism route, you're working for a supplier, you're working for a manufacturer, you're doing something within the auto industry, having writing skills will do you well. I'm a firm believer in that. Bottom line, keep at it. Don't give up. We all face hurdles and problems getting to where we are. Don't quit. But Jenna, I like your story because I've heard you answer this question before. Did you get into did you get into engineering for cars, or did you get into cars for engineering?
Right. So you're exactly right. And you have heard me answer this before, and it's the exact opposite of Jake. Yes, I have a mechanical engineering degree, but it was engineering that led me to cars, not like Jake, that cars led me to engineering. So yes, I had a strong science, math background, got a mechanical engineering degree, and just so happened as I was graduating that Pirelli Tire was recruiting for a tire test engineer right here in Connecticut. So they had moved their North American headquarters and bought Armstrong Tire. So they were in New Haven. So my first job out of college was testing tires for Pirelli. And I remained to this day in the automotive industry, was at a fuel system supplier, and then eventually here. So each of us, most of our team here had some expertise in the automotive area, to Jake's point, be it a supplier before coming to Consumer Reports. And to the blog point, anybody can do this. It's finding a niche for a blog, like-minded people who want to hear what you have to say and listen to you. And then you've seen it just goes from there. So much more opportunity, I think, than even we had. So hopefully that's inspiring for you. It seems like a long time ago when we're telling these stories, but so much appreciated. Again, the question's coming.
And a lot of people that succeed in life, they weren't necessarily the smartest. They didn't necessarily graduate first in their class. They're the ones that just never gave up.
Right.
And I think that's good advice for Evan and all of our kids pursuing their life's work.
A little bit of perseverance. So before we move on to our final segment, we're going to say goodbye to Mike Quincy. Mike, we will see you soon. And we are going to welcome Marta to Talking Cars. Marta Tellado is our president, our CEO, and now author. Congratulations to you from both Jake and I, and certainly the Talking Cars team. Marta's new book, Buyer Aware, comes out next week. And we wanted to take a minute to talk with her about the book and, why you may want to pick it up. So Marta, just to start, tell us your inspiration for the book. You certainly have not been idle during COVID doing this great, great accomplishment. Tell us about the book and what inspired you to write it.
Well, first, let me just say that being on the show is a dream of mine. Right. I'm a fan. I thought, wow, I'm going to get to be a guest on this show and cozy up with Jake and Jen and Dave and all the folks at ATC. So thank you for having me. It's a thrill to be here. You have a very, very dedicated audience, and I so appreciate that about the Talking Cars show. Well, let me tell you, the actual book opens up in a car. The first scene, if you will, I am just 2 years old, so I'm not driving, okay? And we're pulling out of the driveway. My dad has turned the ignition off, and he's rolling the car down the street because we are in Havana, Cuba at the time, and it was right a year after a revolution where my parents decided it's time to go. We want to live in a country where there is hope and opportunity and a willingness for us to make our own choices and be the drivers of our own destiny. And to do that, we had to leave quietly because we were being surveilled, as you might imagine, in a dictatorship that happens. And so we drive out, and here I am many years later, but that's the opening chapter of my passion about the issues that we work on. That really shaped my life, and it shaped the commitment I have to making a difference. And I just have a very deep-seated belief that we can enjoy democratic freedoms and economic equity together, and that's stronger. They can create a marketplace that's fair and just. So it has been a real joy to be able to share that story and then talk about the inspiration I get every day from the folks here at CR.
Oh, it's so cool. And that story, we've shared all of our personal anecdotes about riding around in the Beetle and Jake's VW bus that his parents had. But yours, with that piece that automobile had, with that kind of scary opportunity for you guys, is so neat. And I love you touched on, I actually like the second tagline of the title of the book, Harnessing Our Consumer Power for a Safe, fair and transparent marketplace. Love that. You know, and I was researching before we got on here about how a car is one of the biggest investments people make, only behind their home, their college education. You know, it's in the top 5 of the money spent. So Jake and Marta, I guess too, how is buyer awareness, how does that translate specifically to cars?
Well, first of all, I want to start in saying that, Marta, you didn't have to write a book in order to come onto the show. After all, you know, thank you for letting us, do all the great work that we do and have a little fun in doing so too. So that's all good. But I mean, when it comes to cars, I mean, it's kind of obvious, really. It's about the power of the people. It's the power of consumers, and that if people really, have the education, have the knowledge, know what's really going on, know what the cars are that are reliable and safer, they want those vehicles. I mean, they certainly, people want safe cars, people want reliable cars. But it's not so easy to figure out which ones they are. And that's where we come in. And that we drive the market because we're letting people know all of those facts. And when those buyers are aware, the market changes to create the products that the people want. So, I mean, I think that's really kind of the heart of it in terms of the automotive landscape.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. Consumers have the power to shape the marketplace. And I think what happens at the test track is a way to arm consumers with trustworthy information so that they can go to the marketplace and understand all the elements. And it's only getting harder and harder, I would imagine, because when you think about the features and what a car has become, that's something I know you're all watching out for.
Yeah. What struck me when we were talking about this is there's very few products that you have to share the space with those around you. So you buy a cell phone, you buy an appliance, all the other things that Consumer Reports and others, review. That's your choice. It's in your home. It doesn't affect others. I look simply, Marta, at what's going on the roads behind you. You've got buses and bikes and
Watch out, Marta. Watch out. There's a bus coming at you.
Literally. And that your choice as a consumer affects the others on the road. It affects the air we breathe, the climate we all live in. It's very few products where that choice, and again, I'm getting to the awareness, is not just your own choice. It's a part of a whole environment.
What you're talking about, Jen, is a community, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
That's what's behind me. A city that is absolutely rediscovering what it means to share the road. Mm-hmm. And to share the road with a real diversity of vehicles and recreational bikes as well. And so there's a lot of feeling our new way into this area that I think is affecting also the infrastructure that we need to make sure that the roads are safe when we are in this sort of period where we're also experimenting with cars that have a variety of different capabilities. And some not so transparent.
Yeah, well, it's a new technology, which is really key. And Jen, I like the way you put that. It's like I could buy a refrigerator that breaks. I'm not going to put someone else in danger because the refrigerator is going to fall on some random stranger. It doesn't work that way. But when cars, it does work that way. And that's when we go and we do things like, we're awarding points when we test cars for some of this new technology, like you talk about, Marta, in terms of automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection. And we want to see that standard across the board. Now, some people will say, well, I'm a very attentive driver and I don't need this. But don't you want everyone else on the road to have it because they may not be the attentive driver? And that's where really it's just kind of like the whole community is like we all have to have this technology in order to be safer. It's not, yes, you may always pay attention, but you got to have everyone around you having that because, you don't want to get rear-ended and you don't want to, worry about that if you're a pedestrian.
Well, one of the things I would love for you to share a little bit of is, I talk a lot about in the book, yes, consumers have to make the right choices. They're in the marketplace every day. They can actually vote with their pocketbooks. But the other piece of that safety aspect that you were talking about, Jake, is that, we fought the fight on seatbelts, right? Mm-hmm. Seatbelts were not standard. Backup cameras, not standard. And it took us years of fighting to make those things standard. You're on the front lines now of another battle, and that is all those technological safety features that we know now, because we have the data, do save lives, aren't standard. They're still luxury items. But you use the power of CR and our members to start to shape the market. Say a word about how you did that when you changed the rules and manufacturers responded.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, one example is automatic emergency braking. And there was a voluntary agreement around automatic emergency braking and putting in more vehicles, but not pedestrian detection. And pedestrian fatalities are just, I mean, they're exploding right now. It's really
And it's a
very
problem
sad.
here in New York City.
Yeah, I'm worried about those people right behind you. There's a whole bunch of people walking. So, but yeah, it's a big issue. And there is technology that absolutely statistically helps this situation. The problem was we weren't seeing on a lot of vehicles. So back in 2019, it was around 30% slightly that had this standard equipment. We put it in our ratings. In Consumer Reports ratings, we said if it's standard pedestrian detection, we're going to give you extra points. And we communicated that to automakers right away, even before we made the change. And today, I'm very happy to say about 85% of models now have it standard. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just over a course of just about 3 years. And with chip shortages and everything, they were able to get this because they want to do well in our ratings. They want us to recommend the vehicles to people. They want to be top pick. And as an effect, so many more vehicles that are being built today have this really important technology. And so we're really proud of that.
And that's consumer power. I really, in the absence of a government mandate, we have to have the ability to demand those safety features for all drivers. And I just hats off to the team for that remarkably innovative way to move the market.
Yeah, and you, in your book, Marta, in your excerpt, you talk about consumer rights as civil rights. Like
yes.
There's a very close alignment. And, you just said it, that safety for all. We don't award those points that Jake was talking about unless all the trim lines. You shouldn't have to buy the ultra elite luxury vehicle to be, awarded those safety benefits as well as the people around you. So I really enjoyed consumer rights as civil rights, and that.
I'm glad you raised it, Jen, because when I say that, sometimes people scratch their head and I was like, what do you mean by that? And it's really pretty simple. I mean, you can't have a fair and just marketplace without a transparent and accountable manufacturing sector. You can't have it a healthy democracy without a fair and just marketplace. And so I always like to share this, one of my favorite FDR quotes. And he talked about sort of freedom and democratic freedom and choice making. And he says, freedom is not a half and half affair. If you guarantee equal opportunity at the polling place, you have to guarantee equal opportunity at the marketplace. Yes. And that's why safety in every vehicle should be the opportunity and should be accessible to all. And I'll go a step further and talk about what some of our investigative research discovered about car insurance. And we know that everybody who drives a car has to have car insurance. And he gave a lot of good guidance about how to do that and how to do that in a smart way. But what we discovered was when we did the research that the algorithm has a bias. And that algorithm and the pricing, you think it's based on your driving record. I have a good driving record. My insurance rates will reflect that. But they don't, because the algorithm takes on other characteristics, primarily your zip code and where you live. And so if you live in a primarily white neighborhood, you pay less for insurance, we discovered. And the adjacent neighborhood with the same driving record and the same level of risk pays a higher rate. So there's a lack of transparency right now in the marketplace. And to me, that is also about civil rights.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You think of Jake too. I was thinking one of the best examples, we have all these great examples too of how the testing transfers to those. Jake talks about automatic emergency braking. In years past, it was electronic stability control. How what we see state of the art coming, and we say, we try it out on the track or on local roads and be like, that is a game changer for the future. And I know, Jake, things like direct driver monitoring that we've talked about on the show, that may be the next game changer with, these self-driving capabilities or partially automated or whatever you want to call them. How do we stay engaged? How do we keep people
Yeah,
engaged?
well, sure. It's like also let's careful with the word self-driving, right? I mean, there is not necessarily there aren't
Correct.
self-driving cars you could buy. Let's throw that out right now. But there are vehicles that have very intelligent systems that can automate some of the driving task. And we listen to consumers, we listen to people who buy these vehicles. They like these systems. Absolutely, it can make driving easier, and you feel refreshed after a long drive. The problem is that when you hand over the steering control and the speed control to the computers, you still have to pay attention because these systems are not self-driving yet. You're still the driver. They may be doing the steering. And we have seen some vehicles now that are installing cameras to make sure the driver is engaged, make sure the driver's looking at the road, not just putting their hands on the wheel. And again, we're putting this in our ratings already. And we're actually communicating to automakers how we're changing the ratings in the future too. So we're just giving fair warning. It's like, if you want to put these systems on that people like, you have to keep them safe too, because it's too easy to just over rely on these systems. So we're seeing these, and this is where we're seeing these high-end vehicles first, but they're very quickly going in across the market, and we want to see them implemented as safely as possible.
Well, Jake, what I find a little unsettling about that, and I think you're right, people enjoy these new features. What it makes you feel like, though, is that we're guinea pigs in a sense, right? That these new features are coming on the market faster than we can say, wait a minute, you need the cameras inside because we've learned that distracted driving, and you need to be paying attention. You need to be aware. So that's a little off-putting.
Well, that's a whole new meaning of buyer aware, right? Being aware of, of what's going on the road in front of you. But yes, you see that, and that's the key, is that the technology is moving so fast, faster than regulation, faster than anything else. And some automakers are kind of doing exactly like you said. They're treating drivers as guinea pigs. And whether or not it's the automated driving functions, or it's, there's a new way to change the radio station where you have to wave your hands in the air and, spell out the name of the radio station with your hand. They're trying these things so quickly. And we have to kind of pause and say, well, is this safe? Is this good? And this is where we do have the power, because we're going to call it as it is. There's so much advertising out there. Look how great this is, and look how cool this is, and how sexy it is. We're like, well, really, is this something that consumers are going to enjoy? Is this going to make driving better? And we're going to call it as it is.
Well, I think that's about keeping the market honest, right? And that's something that has been in our DNA, for since our founding. And I think we need it now more than ever, because there's so many new features, so many new technologies. And I think, Jake, you put your finger on it. And I talk a lot about this in the book. The safety regulations that we need we haven't kept up with the speed of the innovation. And so we seem to be trailing and having to play catch up to keep people safe.
That's right.
I think the other area too, Marta, that you definitely talk about is the connectivity of everything.
Yes.
And the privacy, even in cars. Who would have thought that your refrigerator would connect to your Alexa to tell you to pick up, more soda when your refrigerator got depleted, or that your coffee maker and your TV and everything, including your car, you get in and it says you want to go home now, and I know where your home is. All of that, is just another area that there's got to be some focus, and hopefully we are the ones to do that.
That's right. I mean, computer on wheels, and that's not necessarily transparent where all that data is going. And maybe it's being sold to a third party. Maybe it's being sold to car insurance. We don't really know. So we're getting a tremendous amount of connectivity and interface with our devices, but it does introduce another level of quote unquote surveillance into our lives. And that really connects to the opening of the book, the irony of, being in a surveillance state that we left, and now feeling like the marketplace is surveilling us, right? Yeah. That everywhere we turn, whether it's our car, whether it's our devices, we're being tracked. People know where we are. The phone tells me where my car is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. All right, rapid fire here. You talk certainly in the book about the optimism. Sometimes we get on here and we're like, oh, everything's hard and going on. What are you most optimistic about in the years to come? Be it 5, 10, whatever years. What are you most interested and optimistic to see?
Look, I'm really optimistic because we've been here before, right? We pushed back on big tobacco. We pushed back on car manufacturers for safety time and again, and we have watched the market bend in the direction of more fairness and more justice for all. And we're at a watershed moment here where new technologies are moving faster than we're seeing the kind of safety rules of the road that we need to keep people safe. And so part of that optimism comes from seeing the next generation of consumers being so focused on issues like sustainability, on issues of purpose. Is this company contributing something to to our society and to our planet that is going to improve the marketplace and create that fairness that I think we've always been fighting for? So I see a tremendous amount of enthusiasm, and I see a real connection between the kind of society that our next gen wants to see and raise their kids in, and the goals and the values that have always been a part of CR.
It's like the consumer of today knows a bit more their power than here's what we've got to sell and you got to take it. They have a little better sense of their power.
So
Jake, what do you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Marta.
No, I was just going to say, we at the end of every chapter, we give you really actionable advice for today. You need to know what to do now. But we also know that together we could raise our voice and we could start to shape the future that we want to see. A future that, where you don't have to pay extra for life-saving technology, where your privacy isn't a setting, it's a right. And no one can take that away from you.
Yeah. Jake, where's your optimism come from?
I don't know how I could top that. That's not fair at all.
Right.
But I mean, in addition to all that, I would say one thing that's kind of exciting is the technology. I mean, look, I'm an engineer at heart. I love the technology, and we could call the issues that are happening. But you know what? There's a lot of things that the technology can do to make you safer, to make the driving experience better. I mean, let me just throw one out that we didn't really talk about is over-the-air updates. When it comes to cars, we're used to these on our phones, right? And sometimes it makes the phone better. Sometimes it throws some bugs in, right? But, really when it comes to cars, I mean, there is an opportunity to have your car updated and have things fixed. I mean, we saw it with Tesla, the Tesla Model 3. There was a problem with the brakes. We communicated that to Tesla and they were able to fix the brakes over the air basically in a weekend. I mean, that's exciting. Now, obviously, we need some guidelines around that. We don't want, the cars changing haphazardly when you're driving them. But the idea of going from this, a traditional recall where, we hope the car goes back to the dealer and gets fixed, that we can actually fix the cars, in your driveway, that's exciting. And there's so many more technologies that could really make everything safer and much better.
I love that, Jake. And what I love about it is that technology can work for us, not against us. And technology can absolutely center the consumer as a priority. And that's what we've always been about. So at that, you're spot on.
Mine was actually quite similar. Again, technology, but not just technology to advance, but how we integrate, how technology solves the problem of bringing the new in with the old. So again, if we could pick up all our cities and remap them, we would do a great job of saying, here's a pedestrian lane but that's not what we got. I'm looking at that corner behind you. How do we make technology solve the problems for the new vehicles, the old vehicles, the bicyclists, the pedestrians, the motorcyclists, all of them? I think back to, EVs, electric vehicles and the charging infrastructure. Years ago, you would have never thought that you could have a cableless charging. Now you take your phone and you set it down on a pad in your car and it's charging, or you set it down on a pad on your dresser overnight. Imagine that every parking space in a city is a charging grid and you roll your car over and it automatically starts charging. If we could start over, but how do those technologies come about to integrate with what we've already got? So yeah, I think we're all on the same page. It'll be exciting. And how do we test all that over the next 10, 15 years? Who knows? So Marta, I can't thank you enough for sharing all of your insights. Everybody, it doesn't matter wherever you listen or buy books, look for Buyer Aware. Next week, it releases on September 20th. There's also a microsite, buyeraware.cr.org, that gives you some neat little insights in the book and activities around it. Take a look at that. Marta, again, our congratulations. Huge accomplishment. We thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you for everything you do at the Test Track. This was a real honor for me to be on the show with you. It's fun. Don't wait for the next book to invite me back.
Oh, definitely won't. You're coming back
Great.
sometime.
Super.
So that will about do it for this episode. As always, we thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Keep your questions and videos coming. TalkingCars@iCloud.com. This episode was produced and edited by David Abrams and Anatoly Shumsky, and we'll see you next time.